If a relationship has ended and you still can't let go, if you keep reaching for one particular person long after you know the door has closed, and you've started to wonder why you can't just move on like a normal, healthy adult, I want you to know this. You're not weak, and you're not clinging to them. What you're really grieving is the version of yourself that only existed when you were with them. The whole self they helped you become, and that's a far bigger loss than one person walking away. Here's the story we tell ourselves about heartbreak, and it's the reason it feels so confusing. We assume that missing someone is simply about missing them, the sound of their voice, their company, the warmth of having them near. So when the ache won't fade, when months pass and you're still aching for one specific person, you start to think something is wrong with you. You decide you're obsessive, or codependent, or pathetically unable to let go. But that whole framing misses what's actually happening inside you, and once you see it, the strange persistence of the ache finally starts to make sense. Think about what it's like to learn a new language by living somewhere new. You don't just pick up words, you become a slightly different person while you're there. Someone who gestures differently, laughs at different jokes, notices things they never used to notice. The place doesn't just give you memories, it gives you a new self, grown around it. And when you leave, you don't only miss the streets and the faces, you miss the person you got to be while you were there, a self that has nowhere to live now that you've gone. That's what a deep relationship does to you, only far more profoundly. The right person doesn't just stand beside your life, they expand it. They pull new parts of you into being, parts that were waiting for exactly that companionship to wake them up. You become braver around them, or softer, or funnier, or more alive. And here's the thing that nobody warns you about. When they leave, all those new parts of you suddenly have nowhere to go. You're not just missing them, you're mourning a whole self that came alive in their presence, and now has no one to be that self for. Let me tell you about someone. I'll call her Nadia. 2 years after her marriage ended, Nadia still couldn't understand why she wasn't over it. The marriage hadn't even been a happy one near the end. She didn't want him back, not really, and yet she'd find herself sitting in the car after work, unable to drive home, aching for something she couldn't name. She called it weakness. She called herself broken. She was sure that a stronger person would have moved on by now, and the fact that she hadn't felt like proof of some deep flaw in her. What finally shifted for Nadia wasn't forcing herself to forget him. It was a quiet realization one evening that the person she was actually grieving wasn't her ex-husband at all. It was the woman she had been in the early years with him. The one who threw dinner parties, who painted on weekends, who believed the future was wide open. That woman had slowly disappeared, and somewhere in her mind, that whole self was tangled up with him, as if she could only get her back by getting him back. The moment she saw that, the ache changed shape. It stopped being about a man and became about a self she could actually choose to reclaim, with or without him. There's real science under this, and it comes from a psychologist named Arthur Aaron, who spent decades studying what actually happens to two people in a close relationship. His core idea is called self-expansion theory, and it's deceptively simple. We're drawn to relationships, Aaron found, because they let us grow, because another person brings new perspectives, new experiences, new capabilities into our own sense of who we are. In his research, partners in close bonds literally start to include the other person in their concept of self. The line between where you end and they begin gets genuinely blurry, not as a metaphor, but in the measurable way we process identity. And that blurring is exactly why a breakup cuts so much deeper than losing an acquaintance ever could. When a relationship like that ends, Aaron's work suggests, you don't just lose a partner, you lose a piece of your own self-concept, the expanded self that grew up around them. Studies in his tradition found that, after a breakup, people's sense of who they are literally becomes smaller and less clear, a contraction of the self. So that disorientation you feel, that sense of not quite knowing who you are anymore, isn't drama, and it isn't dysfunction. It's the felt experience of a self that got smaller and is now trying to figure out how to grow back. So if you've been calling yourself weak for not getting over someone, here are 3 things I want you to understand about what's really happening. First, the ache is a measure of how much you grew, not how broken you are. The deeper a relationship expanded you, the more of yourself you have to grow back when it ends, and that takes real time. You wouldn't call someone weak for limping after a wound that deep. The length of the grief isn't evidence of a flaw, it's evidence of how much self was tangled up in that bond, and how much room there now is to fill. Second, the parts of you that came alive with them were always yours. This is the part that changes everything. The braver, softer, more open person you became in that relationship that wasn't borrowed from them and repossessed when they left. They were the conditions that let those parts grow, but the parts themselves are you. You can keep them. You get to carry forward the self you discovered, even though the person who helped you find it is gone. Third, reclaiming that self is the actual work of moving on, far more than forgetting the person ever could be. Stop trying to delete the memories or numb the missing. Instead, ask the real question: who did I become with them, and how do I keep being that on my own? The painting, the courage, the openness, the version of you that felt most alive, those aren't relics of a dead relationship. They're an inheritance, waiting for you to claim them in your own name. So the next time the ache rises and you reach for that one person, pause and ask yourself what you're truly reaching for. Almost always, underneath the longing for them, is a longing for who you were allowed to be. And that self, unlike the relationship, is not gone. It's still in there, waiting to be lived again, this time by you alone. Helen Keller, who lost so much and yet built a life of extraordinary fullness, once wrote that what we once enjoyed and deeply loved, we can never truly lose, because all that we love deeply becomes a part of us. She understood that the people who change us don't really leave when they leave. The self they helped grow stays behind, woven into who we are, ours to keep long after they've gone. So be gentle with the part of you that's still grieving. It isn't clinging, and it isn't weak. It's mourning a beautiful, expanded self. And quietly, it's also learning how to be that self alone. If this reframe shifted something in you, it's one in a whole series of them, so subscribe and I'll keep sending them your way. And I'd really like to know, who did you become with someone you've lost? And which part of that self do you most want to keep? Tell me in the comments. You were never just clinging to one person. You were grieving who you got to be with them. And that self was always, always yours.